Alright, so right now we're going to work on our gun setup, our scope mounting, and the rest of the rifle setup. Today we're going to be working on Pistol Pete's Recce rifle. It's a SIG 716 with a 16-inch barrel. We have Lang Zeng Tactical scope mount, 35mm rings on it, and a Leupold Mark V HD scope in 5-25 with a Tremor 3 reticle. For this Recce rifle build, we're also going to run a Magpul bipod with M-LOK mount and a MAWL C1 Plus IR invisible laser. You're going to need some tools to do this. You're going to need the correct size bits, i.e. Torx bits for these rings. You may have rings that have a different type of attachment, but these have Torx bits. You also need hex bolt socket, which we have here. This one is a 13mm for this particular scope mount. You're going to need a torque wrench that runs in inch-pounds for the right specifications. And it's nice to have a set of bits. I have this Chapman kit with multiple hex bits, flat tip, and Phillips head bits, and I have my scope leveling kit. I also have a plumb line set up, and I always keep that multi-tool on standby just in case I need it. So now the first step we're going to do, we've already put the scope loosely mounted into the mount. So a lot of manufacturers will tell you to mount the mount directly to the rail first before you loosely put the scope in there, but to expedite this and to save time, we did it our own way. So what we're going to do is put this on here and just kind of lightly hand tighten these nuts, and then I'm going to get Pete behind the scope, and we're going to make sure his eye relief and eye box are good to go before we tighten this thing down, torque it down to specs, and torque the scope rings down to specs as well. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and torque down the mount to the rifle itself. The recommended settings is 63 to 68 inch-pounds. I've set my torque wrench to 65. I'm using the 13mm, which is the size of the nuts on the mount. Alright, 65 inch-pounds. The scoop is loosely mounted into the rings. So now we're going to adjust this to the shooter's eye box and his eye relief. We've checked the length of pull in the buttstock, so his buttstock to his trigger finger, and it's in his range, his comfortable distance that he likes it. So I'm going to go ahead and move the scope a little bit until he has no scope shadow, that dark ring around, and he has a full picture in the glass. The entire circle of glass is clear, and he can see with magnification. His rings are loose enough for me to do that. So I'm just going to move it a little bit. You start off with the scope mounted as far forward in the rings as possible, and then you start working it back towards him. So I'm going to go ahead and start working it back.
Perfect, right there.
Right there?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so there's no scope shadow?
None.
Alright, you can see everything, the full picture, the whole glass is clear?
Yep.
Alright, now I didn't state before, you want to have this on max power because that's going to be his least amount of eye relief, the distance from his scope to his eyeball, based on wherever his cheek weld is. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten the rings down to specifications, and we're also going to torque the rings while we level the scope out. Now that the mount is mounted to the gun, now we have to level out the scope. We have the eye relief set to the shooter's eye, as well as his eye box is centered with his length of pull. So now we're going to level this out. I've set up a plumb line down yonder. I'm going to have the shooter get behind the gun. He's going to make sure the vertical line in the reticle aligns with the plumb line. While he's doing that, I'm going to level out this rifle. I have my scope leveling kit right here. So shooter, come behind the rifle. Alright, I'm going to level the rifle out, and then we're going to align the vertical line to the thing. So let me move the rifle a little bit. Alright, get behind the gun. Now I'm going to move the scope. Now I'm going to turn the scope. Alright, can you line that up? Is the vertical line lined up with the plumb line?
It's not. It needs to go to the left, just a smidgen.
Okay. Hold on, let me level out the rifle. How about now? Alright, we're moving it, so I'm gonna level out. Don't move. I need you to stay on there. Alright, because right now it's leveled, but then when you get on the gun it kind of torques a little, so I need you to try not to lean too much on the gun, but make sure that, is my hand in your way? Make sure that vertical line lines up with the plumb line. Right now your gun is pretty level.
Okay, so the whole rifle's to the right of the plumb line. So we need to move the rifle
Okay.
to the left.
I need you to move the rifle then.
Okay.
And then I'll just re-level it out. Is the vertical line lined up with the plumb line?
Now it is.
It is?
Yep.
Okay. Because I'm getting the rifle bubble level and the scope bubble is level. Alright, go ahead and relax. You can come off the gun now. Okay, so now the shooter, we line him up on the plumb line down yonder while I leveled his scope out using a level for the rifle and a level for the actual scope. If you run a level on the scope, some scopes, depending on the manufacturer, recommend you remove that elevation cap and get the flattest possible surface. I've used these scopes before, these Mark V. These are pretty flat. So we're going to verify this once the scope is mounted. We're going to take it out to the range and zero it, and then we're going to do a tall target test, and that's going to track to make sure, you know, the adjustments in the scope dials are accurate to what they say they are, and the scope tracks as it's supposed to, as well tells us if it's level. So if it's not level, it's not going to track correctly. So generally that's the leveling process. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the rest of the scope ring nuts to torque. The recommended torque setting for the ring caps is 18 to 23 inch-pounds. So I'm going to adjust my torque wrench down to 18. I'll set it for 20. We'll go to 20 inch-pounds. Alright, so I'm on 20 inch-pounds. This particular scope mount, the Langzang Tactical mount, uses Torx head screws in the scope ring caps. So I'm going to go ahead and find the correct one. I think I set it aside. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. So I get the right size. Alright, so now we're going to torque the top half of the scope rings, or the scope ring caps. you have a total for each ring set, 4 screws, right? And you need to screw these on evenly. So what I like to do is, to make sure these scope caps are level, I push down all the way with the scopes, or with the screws just loosely turned in there, and I make sure the spacing is even in the gaps between the top and the bottom of the scope ring on both sides. It should be even on both sides. You're just eyeballing it. It's not anything crazy. Now, I'm going to start with the front side. I'm going to use my Torx bit, and I'm going to use an X pattern. All right, so I'm going to start with the top front ring, the far forward one, and just till it meets a little resistance, and then I'm going to go directly across diagonally to the rear side on the right side, the rear side screw, and just turn it. It spins freely. Now it stops. Now I'm going to go back to the left side, the rear one. That one's already meeting resistance, so I might back it off just a tad. And then I'm going to go to the front most screw on the right side. There's plenty of room of travel in there. Now they're all kind of bottomed out, where they're just starting to meet resistance, and I'm going to eyeball them, both gaps, just to make sure. Now I'm going to move to the rear. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the slack out, push down, and I'm going to eyeball the gaps. This gap's a little bigger on the left side than the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and start going till I meet resistance. Now I'm going to go the cross pattern to the rear. There's going to be a lot of travel in this one. And resistance. Now I'm going to go to the rear one on the back ring and go all the way down till I meet a little resistance, and then all the way to the front side on the right side, meet resistance. Now I'm going to eyeball those gaps again to make sure they're even. Okay, so now they're bottomed out and they're ready to start torquing. I'm going to start in the same order that I did before. I'm going to do a quarter turn, go X across, quarter turn, X across, quarter turn. I'm meeting a little resistance on these quarter turns. And that one's just about already there. I didn't even have to turn it. I'm going to eyeball the gap. The gaps look even. Now I'm going to come to the rear side, starting in the front on the left side to the rear cap. Quarter turn, a little resistance. Quarter turn. Actually, this one's taking more like a half turn. Go across. Less than a quarter of a turn on that one. And I'm just taking the slack out. This one didn't have any movement. I'm going to check the gaps. All right, so now on this side, on the rear ring, it looks like the rear one on the right side has a little more of a gap. So I'm going to turn those a little bit extra. Just like a micro, like an eighth of a turn. Because I want to keep those gaps as even as possible. I'm going to come back to the front. I'm going to eye my gaps just to make sure they're even. All right, now I'm going to start in the right front. Quarter turn. Go across to the rear ring nut. Quarter turn. Then opposite side. Quarter turn. Click. So I hit my 20 inch-pounds on that one and this one in the front. Now I'm going to eyeball my gaps. They look pretty even. Now I'm coming back to the rear set. Same thing, starting with the front left side. Quarter turn, go across in the X pattern to the rear one. Click, I hit my 20 inch-pounds, go directly across. 20 inch-pounds, 20 inch-pounds. Now I'm going to verify this one because I didn't get the click on the front left side. Alright, so now I'm at 20 inch-pounds all around. I'm going to eyeball my gaps and make sure they're even, which they are. The rear side is done. Now I'm going to finish off the front and torque it to spec. All right, not even a quarter of a turn, we're there. We're there at almost all these screws. Yep, we're right there on the cusp. All right, so now all of our screws are torqued evenly to 20 inch-pounds. Now what we can do now is put it back on the levels, make sure the scope's level to the gun, because sometimes when you're torquing these, if you don't do them evenly, you tighten one side down more than the other, you'll take the scope off level. This scope, I didn't mention before, has a 20-minute of angle elevation built into it. So it's already canted to allow for 20 minutes of angle of elevation. All right, so I got my shooter behind the gun. I had him lining up the vertical stadia line in his scope with the plumb line down yonder, while I torqued out the scope and tightened the rings. So everything's tight now. I didn't mention when I had the shooter behind the gun, but first thing I did was set the optical diopter ring to his eye. Basically, I had him look up at the light and just make sure his reticle lines were nice and crisp and clear. Don't stare at it more than 3 to 4 seconds because your eye will adjust to try to make it clear. Just take a quick look, make sure in blank space and light it looks clear, and that's it. These are pretty easy, fast focus dial ring in the rear. It's basically your ocular setting to your eye. So if you wear eyeglasses, you can correct for your eye lenses or your eyeglasses with the scope and shoot without prescription eyeglasses if you choose. I also got his parallax set to his eye relief when he was behind the gun. So we adjusted the parallax, which you want to normally do that on a target downrange, like 50 to 100 yards. And we did that outside. We went outside the shop and did it. So now the scope's tightened down and torqued the specs, we verified it on the plumb line. Now we're going to finish putting together the other components, which are pretty fast and simple. What Pete wanted to run as a bipod is the Magpul bipod, and this one has the M-LOK attachments. We've already pre-rigged the mounts with the M-LOK screws and nuts, so all we're going to do is attach it, and we're going to go ahead and torque that down. Before you mount this thing, you want it mounted with the legs open in the open position, because you want to be able to access those screws easily. If the legs are folded forward, you won't be able to get in there as easily. Just make sure you put it in the right direction. In other words, you want the legs to fold towards the front of the rifle or the muzzle. So legs towards the front. I'm going to find my M-LOK slots. I'm going to make sure the nuts, the M-LOK nuts are straight and aligned, and I'm going to go ahead and seat them in there. Hopefully without dropping this rifle. Alright, they're in there now. So I'm going to go ahead and ride that bipod as far forward as I can. That way when the gun recoils, it'll already be tightened down and it won't move. I need the right size bits. I'm going to go ahead and collapse both legs so I can get to the, or open both legs so I can get to the bits easier. There we go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and hand tighten both of them first, and then I want to go ahead and apply some torque to them. Now these M-LOK nuts are designed to turn when you tighten them, so they kind of offset and kind of lock down inside the rail. Although this one's spinning freely, it's not helping, so I need a little help. I'm going to set this down and put a handle on this guy. Actually, I'm going to need an extension. All right, here we go. Torquing it down. Torqued it down so good the bit stayed in there. Torque down the front. All right, bipod is good to go. These I've never used these Magpul bipods, but they have the panning feature. You have leg extension, and you have the ability to fold the legs forward. And you can tighten down the pan so it doesn't pan if you want. There we go. All right, so that's the bipod. Now we're going to go ahead and attach his IR and visible laser. He has the MAL C1 Plus. It's iSafe. It's the civilian version, the iSafe laser. This just locks into the Picatinny mount. You need a flat tip, a large flat tip. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down that center screw. That's the main point of adjustment to the rail for the optic. Alright, we got it on there. That's about it. This is Pistol Pete's Recce rifle setup. The SIG 716 with Magpul bipod, MAL C1 Plus IR and Viz laser, as well as a Leupold Mark V HD 5-25 with a Tremor 3 reticle. Nice build, nice rifle. Hope you found this video informative, and it helps you out if you're having any questions about this. Make sure you subscribe, you like this video, and do all that stuff, and I'll see you again later.